Emily had always believed her life with Daniel was steady and predictable, a calm bubble of love that she thought would never burst. They lived just outside a quiet Colorado town, surrounded by mountains and tall pine trees, the kind of place where mornings smelled of fresh air and evenings felt endless. She loved the peacefulness, the routine, the way Daniel's smile could make the day feel brighter, but lately, something had shifted, something subtle but powerful, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. It started with small changes, subtle enough that she told herself she was imagining things. Daniel spending more hours at the stables, coming home later than usual, sometimes with dirt on his boots, sometimes with a strange look in his eyes. The easy laughter they once shared at dinner became rare, conversations shortened, and the warmth that had always filled their home began to fade. Emily tried to convince herself it was normal, that passion sometimes looks like obsession, and that love requires patience, but deep down, she knew that feeling of unease wasn't going to go away. Daniel loved horses, everyone knew that, especially Storm, a magnificent black stallion with a fierce temperament that no one could tame. Daniel had called him Storm because he was wild, untouchable, and unpredictable, much like the man himself. Emily had always admired their bond. She would watch from the wooden fence, feeling both admiration and a quiet sense of worry. Daniel's patience with Storm seemed endless. The way he whispered to him, guided him, calmed him, it was beautiful, almost hypnotic, but it also made Emily feel invisible sometimes, because the horse received attention that she used to get, and she hated that feeling. One evening, Emily's heart ached more than usual. She couldn't shake a sense that something was wrong, and she decided to visit the stables without telling Daniel. She needed to see for herself, to confirm or deny the gnawing worry in her chest. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red, a perfect backdrop to what she suspected might be a perfect betrayal. Her steps quickened as she approached the familiar path, the smell of hay and leather hitting her before she even reached the gate. Emily's pulse raced, and a quiet voice inside her whispered that this could change everything. When she reached the stables, her heart froze. Daniel wasn't alone. Standing close to him was a woman Emily didn't know, someone unfamiliar but confident, moving around the horse as if she belonged there, her laughter soft, a sound that somehow made Emily's chest tighten. Daniel's hand rested on Storm's reins, but his gaze kept shifting toward the woman, closer than any stranger should ever be. Emily's stomach churned. She felt an icy knot of fear and betrayal, and she realized that admiration she once felt for Daniel's bond with Storm was now mixed with suspicion, a dangerous cocktail of worry and heartbreak. Emily watched silently, hiding behind the fence, every detail piercing her heart, the way the woman leaned slightly toward Daniel, the way he didn't pull away, the casual intimacy that should have been reserved for her. The scene felt surreal, like something she had only seen in movies, but this was real, her life, her husband, right there in front of her. And the truth hit harder than she expected. Emily wanted to run, to scream, to confront, but she stayed frozen, trapped between fear and disbelief, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Storm moved restlessly, shifting his weight, snorting, the tension between the three humans mirrored in the horse's body. Emily noticed how Daniel's hand remained calm, guiding Storm as if he could control everything but the one thing that mattered most. Emily's chest tightened, and she felt a tear slip down her cheek. She didn't want to believe it, but the signs were clear. Something had already changed, something she couldn't ignore. The trust she had built over years was slipping through her fingers, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar doubt. Instead of confronting him, Emily walked away slowly, trying to make herself invisible, her steps quiet on the path home. Her mind racing with questions she didn't have answers for. Had she really lost him? Had he been pulling away all this time? Was the woman just a helper? Or had something deeper been growing in the shadows of the stables? The sky darkened, and the cool evening air hit her face, making her shiver. Not from the cold, but from the realization that her world was no longer as safe and predictable as she had believed. That night, Emily lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment, every glance, every laugh she had once shared with Daniel, feeling the distance that had grown between them like a canyon. She wondered how she could have missed the signs, how trust could erode so quietly until it became unrecognizable. She loved him, that part hadn't changed, but love alone wasn't enough to fill the cracks. The betrayal, whether real or imagined, had already planted its seeds, and she knew things would never be the same. As sleep evaded her, Emily realized that fear had driven her, fear of loss, fear of facing the truth, but deep down, a spark of determination began to grow. She wouldn't crumble completely. She needed to see this through, to understand what had happened, to confront it one way or another. She wasn't ready yet, but she knew she couldn't stay silent forever. The path ahead felt uncertain and dangerous, but for the first time that day, Emily felt a flicker of clarity amidst the storm of her emotions. She would face the truth, and whether it brought heartbreak or liberation, she would not run away again. The night was long, the silence heavy, but Emily held on to that spark, gripping it tightly, knowing that the first crack in trust was only the beginning of a journey she hadn't expected to take, a journey where she would have to fight for herself, for clarity, and perhaps, in some way, for love. She finally drifted into a restless sleep, her mind filled with questions and the faint, unshakable certainty that her life was about to change forever. The story of betrayal and discovery had begun. And Emily was standing at the edge, ready to step forward, unsure of what she would find, but certain she had to face it. Emily returned home after that first night at the stables, but nothing felt the same. Each day seemed heavier than the last, and the silence between her and Daniel grew like a shadow she couldn't shake. She watched him closely, noticing how he avoided her gaze, how his phone was always in his pocket, face down, how his voice softened when he spoke about Storm or the stables. Every gesture, every glance seemed calculated, and it left her feeling like an outsider in the home she once shared. The familiar walls now seemed distant and cold, and Emily couldn't stop the sinking feeling in her chest that the life she knew was slowly slipping away. She tried to focus on normal things, cooking dinner, tidying the house, even going for short walks around the neighborhood, but every sound reminded her of the stables, every movement of Daniel reminded her of Rachel, and Emily found herself replaying the moment she had seen them, the way Rachel's hand brushed his arm, the way he didn't pull away, the way Storm had seemed to sense the tension and grow restless. It wasn't just jealousy, it was a deep, gnawing worry that her life was changing in ways she couldn't control. One evening, the tension became too much to bear. Emily walked into the living room, her voice calm but fragile, and asked, "Who is she?" Daniel froze for a second, and in that pause, Emily saw more than words could say, a flash of guilt, a flicker of something he couldn't hide. "Just someone helping at the stables," he said too quickly, too rehearsed, and Emily's heart sank. She nodded, forcing herself to appear composed, but inside, the pain was sharp, the uncertainty unbearable. She wanted to confront him further, but a quiet voice inside her told her to hold back, to watch, to see what would unfold. Days passed like this, a quiet war of observation and suspicion. Emily followed subtle clues, little things that spoke louder than words, a text she saw briefly, a laugh she overheard on the phone, the way Daniel suddenly seemed tense when she entered a room. It all added up to a truth she didn't want to face, and yet couldn't ignore. Storm, that wild horse, became a symbol of everything she couldn't control. The horse's power, its restlessness, mirrored the growing chaos in her life. The energy of betrayal, unspoken and sharp, hung in the air like electricity before a storm. Finally, Emily couldn't wait any longer. She returned to the stables again, this time making sure Daniel saw her. She needed to confront the feeling she had been carrying. She walked down the familiar path, boots crunching against gravel, heart pounding in rhythm with the tension in the air. Storm was there, restless as always, snorting, stamping, a force of nature that seemed to mirror the storm inside Emily. Daniel noticed her immediately, and for a brief moment, something changed in his expression, surprise, maybe guilt, but Emily didn't pause. She walked forward, steady, determined, her eyes on him and Rachel, who was standing just a few feet away, laughing lightly, as if everything was normal. The moment Emily stepped closer, storm shifted, the horse's energy almost overwhelming. Emily felt a rush of fear, not from Daniel, not even from Rachel, but from the power of storm itself. Emily froze for a second, feeling the raw force of something untamed. Then Daniel rushed forward, trying to calm the horse, but his attention remained on Rachel, not her, and that was the breaking point. Emily realized she wasn't just losing Daniel, she had already been pushed aside in the spaces where love used to live. The quiet moments, the private smiles, the shared warmth, all now belonged to someone else, and Emily's chest tightened. The betrayal was no longer just a feeling, it was real, tangible, and unavoidable. Yet, instead of collapsing or shouting, Emily made a choice. She turned and walked away, each step firm, refusing to give Daniel the satisfaction of seeing her crumble. The path back home felt endless, her mind replaying every detail, every glance, every laugh she had witnessed. She understood the depth of the betrayal, but she also realized that anger alone wouldn't save her. She needed clarity, she needed strength. She needed to step back before confronting the truth fully. Each footfall was a silent promise to herself that she would face what had been done, and she wouldn't run forever. At home, Emily allowed herself to feel the storm inside her. Tears came without warning, her hands shook, and she finally admitted to herself what she had feared, that Daniel's heart had shifted, that the space they once shared was now occupied by someone else. But even in that heartbreak, a spark of determination ignited. She couldn't let fear dictate her actions, she couldn't let betrayal define her worth. Emily realized she had to reclaim herself first before dealing with him, before confronting what had been broken. She needed to be strong enough to face the truth, and not just the surface lies, but the deeper truths hiding beneath. Night after night, Emily lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from the stables, thinking about Daniel, thinking about Rachel, thinking about Storm, and what each represented in her life. She realized that fear had controlled her for too long, that love had made her blind, that patience had kept her silent when she should have spoken. The betrayal, however painful, had forced her to see clearly. She couldn't change the past, but she could decide how to move forward. The pain became a teacher, and Emily knew she had to learn. Weeks passed, and the quiet planning, the internal reckoning, shaped Emily's resolve. She began to understand that the bravest step wasn't confrontation in anger, but confrontation with clarity. She needed to return to the stables, to face Daniel and Rachel not as someone trembling with heartbreak, but as someone standing firm, with dignity and awareness. The weight of betrayal had become the weight of preparation, and Emily felt herself growing stronger, each day sharpening her mind, each moment of reflection strengthening her heart. Finally, Emily understood the truth of the situation. Not everything could be controlled. Some things were wild, like storm, like love when it shifts, like betrayal when it comes quietly and without warning. But she also understood that she had the power to face it, to demand clarity, to reclaim herself. She would return, not as a victim, not as someone trembling in fear, but as someone ready to confront, to ask the questions that mattered, to stand in the light of truth, ready to take whatever came next. The storm had not passed, but Emily had learned to meet it, to face it, and to prepare herself for the moment when nothing could be ignored any longer. Emily stayed away from the town for weeks, needing distance to think clearly. She packed a small bag and went to Seattle to stay with her sister. The city felt alive and chaotic compared to the quiet Colorado streets, but Emily welcomed it. It was a distraction, a place where she could breathe without constantly replaying Daniel's actions or Rachel's presence. Every morning she walked along the waterfront, letting the brisk air fill her lungs, letting the movement of people and waves remind her that life went on, that she could survive this, that she could grow stronger despite the betrayal she had endured. At first, Emily felt lost, haunted by the images from the stables, replaying Rachel's laughter, Daniel's distracted gaze, Storm's restless energy, the scenes looping in her mind as if mocking her, but slowly, the sharp pain softened, replaced by something heavier but steadier, determination. Emily realized that her heartbreak had taught her a lesson. She had loved blindly, trusted without question, and now, she had to learn how to trust herself again. She spent her days thinking, reflecting on what she wanted, who she was, and what kind of life she deserved. The betrayal no longer defined her, but it had opened her eyes to what mattered. Nights were harder, quiet and lonely, but Emily used them to strengthen herself. She wrote down her thoughts, sometimes letting anger pour onto paper, sometimes letting sadness take shape in words. Each note, each journal entry, helped her organize the storm inside, helped her see that she wasn't powerless, that she had a choice. She could retreat and let this define her, or she could return and face it head on. The thought of confronting Daniel and Rachel no longer filled her with fear but with a sense of purpose. She was ready to claim her own dignity, no matter what awaited her. Weeks turned into a month, and Emily felt a quiet change inside her. She no longer trembled at the memory of the stables, she no longer imagined Daniel's smile reserved only for Rachel. She had become aware of her strength, of her ability to walk through pain without losing herself, and she realized that the encounter at the stables hadn't broken her, it had shaped her, made her sharper, more aware, more grounded in reality. Emily knew that returning wasn't about winning Daniel back or confronting Rachel. It was about reclaiming her life and making clear that she would no longer be sidelined or ignored. Finally, the day came when Emily decided to go back. She packed lightly, dressed simply, and drove back to the small Colorado town. The familiar road stirred memories, some sweet, some painful, but Emily didn't flinch. She focused on her breathing, keeping her mind clear, preparing herself for the moment she would step back into the stables. She knew Daniel would be there, likely expecting her to arrive timid, confused, maybe begging for explanations, but Emily wasn't that person anymore. She had faced the pain, she had wrestled with her emotions, and now she would face them with strength, clarity, and calm resolve. When she arrived, the stables looked exactly the same, the scent of hay and leather filling the air, familiar and grounding. Storm was there, majestic and restless as always. Daniel looked up from brushing the horse, surprise flickering across his face. Rachel was there too, standing close, her presence casual, confident, unaware that Emily's return was different from before. Emily walked toward them steadily, boots crunching against the gravel, her heart beating not from fear but from determination. She no longer trembled at the power of Storm or the tension between the three of them. She was prepared to face the truth. Emily stopped a few feet away, and Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but Emily held up a hand, silently asking him to wait. She didn't need his words to see the reality of the situation. She had already seen it before. She knew it now. What mattered was her own stance, her own voice. She finally spoke, soft but firm. "I'm not here to fight, I'm here to end what you already broke." The words were steady, deliberate, and carried a weight that Daniel hadn't seen before. Rachel blinked, slightly surprised, the casual confidence she had shown before faltering for a moment. Emily's presence shifted the energy in the stable, calm but resolute, a force Daniel had underestimated. Storm shifted, sensing the tension, stamping his hoof, letting out a sharp, echoing snort, and Emily felt it like a symbol, not of fear, but of the power she had gained within herself. The horse, wild and untamed, reminded her that some things couldn't be controlled, some forces were beyond human hands. Just like betrayal, just like love that changes unexpectedly, Emily stood firm, and in that moment, she understood the lesson fully. She didn't need Daniel's approval, Rachel's acknowledgement, or anyone else's validation. She only needed herself, her own clarity, and her own strength. Daniel tried to speak, but Emily didn't wait. She had said everything that mattered, and she turned slowly, deliberately, toward the path that led out of the stable, feeling the weight of the past lighten with every step. Storm let out another sharp sound, powerful and untamed, but Emily didn't flinch. She paused briefly, looking back, not with fear, not with sadness, but with understanding. She realized that walking away was not defeat, it was bravery, it was self-respect, it was claiming a life she could live fully, and she understood that facing betrayal didn't always mean confronting it in anger. Sometimes it meant standing tall and leaving the rest behind. As she walked away, Emily felt a strange sense of relief. The town, the stable, the memories all seemed less heavy, her step steady, her mind clear. She had finally reclaimed herself. She knew she would face challenges ahead. Perhaps Daniel would try to speak, perhaps Rachel would be in her path, but Emily was ready. She wasn't trembling anymore. She was steady, strong, aware of her own worth. She had survived the storm, and now she could live her life on her own terms. The betrayal had changed her, but it had also made her braver, and as she walked past the stables for the last time, she felt a quiet certainty, a promise to herself that no matter what came next, she would not run, she would face it, fully and fearlessly. Emily understood at last that life didn't always give closure, that not every betrayal ended neatly, but strength, clarity, and self-respect were the true victories. She had grown through the pain, found herself again, and discovered the courage to confront the world as she was, unshaken, unbroken, and fully aware that some things, like storm, like love, like trust, could be wild and untamed, but she could face them, navigate them, and survive them. Her story wasn't about revenge, it wasn't about winning, it was about returning to herself, and Emily finally knew that was the most important victory of all.